Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are looking into something truly, well, mind-bending. It's called Acquired Savant Syndrome.
Right, ASS. It's that incredibly rare situation where someone has a serious trauma like a stroke or a bad head injury, maybe something affecting the whole nervous system.
And suddenly, boom, they wake up with these extraordinary abilities, music maybe, or complex math, hyper-realistic art, stuff they had zero training in before.
It's just fascinating. And, most studies focus on the physical side, brain scans, behavior changes. But our deep dive today, it's pulling from different sources. We're looking at unique esoteric investigations, the kind that use specialized techniques like remote viewing, deep hypnosis.
Exactly. So we're looking at sources that view the brain not just as, physical matter, but as this complex, multidimensional energetic system.
That's the key.
So our goal here is to unpack the subtle mechanics these researchers describe. What actually happens, energetically speaking, when someone just acquires genius-level skills overnight. Let's get into it.
Okay, so the first thing the sources point to is this really radical shift, both physically and energetically, right at the moment of trauma.
A shift, not just damage.
Well, damage is part of it, obviously, but the sources describe it more like specific energy sectors in the brain getting physically shifted, maybe even displaced, violently sometimes. It's like a reorganization forced by intense pressure.
And the analogy they use is pretty striking, isn't it? They talk about energetic threads or connections breaking or shifting.
Yeah, between brain structures. And this break, this collision creates a new potential, like two spheres colliding and setting up a whole new resonance, almost accidentally.
Okay, but what's driving that? Where does the force for that massive shift actually come from?
This is where it gets really counterintuitive. The investigation suggests the initial trigger, the impulse for the brain change, doesn't actually start in the brain, not in the cerebrum anyway.
Really? Where then?
It points to the entire neurological system, specifically that energetic stem or channel that runs alongside the spine. That seems to be the source of the massive energetic jolt, the bodziek, they call it.
Wait, hold on. So the head trauma might just be the event that unlocks the door, so to speak? But the actual power surge that rewires everything comes up from the spinal energy channel. That completely changes how you'd think about CNS prom activation.
It really does. And this whole energetic picture extends into the recovery, too. The sources really stress how crucial the patient's internal response is.
How so?
Well, they say success in rehab and even in activating these savant skills depends heavily on the person immediately focusing their strong will, their conscious desire to recover.
Somnolula and Jiridavisdrawenia, the conscious will and desire for change.
Exactly. That's cited as the first essential element. It suggests that even if the brain's been physically rearranged, a passive patient might not actually light up that new potential.
So the willpower is like the catalyst. It makes the energetic shift stabilize into an actual usable talent.
Precisely. This active conscious engagement seems critical, and it leads to this idea that the trauma forces a reallocation of functions. Damaged parts push their jobs onto new areas.
Onto previously unused circuits, maybe.
Right. And sometimes this activates completely different abilities than the ones that were lost or damaged. New pathways open up.
Which brings us neatly to the next big question. Where does the actual knowledge come from? When someone suddenly starts, calculating prime numbers or composing symphonies, did they somehow learn it instantly, or was it already in there somewhere?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The remote viewing data offers a couple of main possibilities here.
Okay. What's the first one?
The first suggests the information was, in a sense, already possessed by the person, maybe linked to what the source calls records of previous incarnations or lifetimes, like an old database unlocked by the shock.
So instant genius, because the trauma just cracked open the memory vault, basically.
That's one theory presented. The second possibility is more about accelerated learning. Hyper-accelerated, really.
How does that work?
The idea is the person suddenly becomes incredibly open to learning, absorbing knowledge at a phenomenal rate. Like a young child soaking up language, bardzo fast chuni, as the source puts it. Very rapid absorption.
So in that case, the trauma didn't provide the knowledge itself, but the capacity to grab it almost instantly.
Exactly. It unlocked the learning potential to an extreme degree.
Now, what about patients who seem completely unresponsive right after the trauma? You often hear about savants emerging from comas or non-communicative states. How do these esoteric sources view their mental state during that time?
This is really important and maybe a bit sobering. the data indicates that even when someone appears totally non-communicative, ni kontaktoem,
Yeah.
they're perceived as essentially hearing everything, understanding what's happening on a certain level, even if they can't react physically or articulate anything. The complex mind is still functioning.
Wow. So even if the body's offline, the mind might be fully aware, possibly even undergoing that genius-level reorganization internally.
That's the implication. It certainly makes you think about how we approach patient care in those critical moments, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Moving from the physical trauma in the mind to the subtle energy map, the aura, the chakras. The initial esoteric look showed a really strange energy signature for these savants. What did they first notice?
Yeah, the initial readings were definitely anomalous. The most striking thing was this unusual, super strong pillar of energy right at the root chakra.
The base chakra, what was it doing?
It was described as pulling the person incredibly strongly towards the earth, like an intense need for grounding uzimanania was suddenly paramount.
Huh. A super genius needing massive energetic grounding. That almost makes a weird kind of sense, like their mind's suddenly processing way too much data and needs its serious anchor.
Right, but then the upper centers, the third eye and crown, initially looked like, well, chaos, disharmony.
Okay, so root is hyperactive pulling down, head is chaotic, but that wasn't the final word, was it?
No. When they looked deeper, especially at the really profound cases, the refined analysis suggested the chaos wasn't chaos at all. It was actually a sign of a new, highly specialized function.
What kind of function?
It turns out these individuals don't really need the standard upper energy centers operating in the usual way. They've effectively bypassed them.
Bypass the crown and third eye, how? Those are usually seen as the connection points to higher consciousness, universal information.
Well, this is where it gets, as you said, really mind-bending. The source suggests the trauma triggers a unique process where their brain accesses a specific structure within the mind itself, a golden ratio spiral structure. Zod hypothesia.
A golden ratio spiral, like the mathematical pattern, embedded in the brain's energy field.
Apparently so. And the spiral structure acts like a key, giving them direct, unhindered access to what the source calls the knowledge of the universe.
So it's not flowing through the chakras in the typical way.
Their connection is described as constant, undisturbed. It sidesteps the need for that standard upper energy flow because they've tapped into this geometric interface directly within the brain.
Hold on. Accessing universal data via a built-in geometric spiral. That sounds less like, I don't know, spiritual energy work and more like activating some kind of organic high-tech circuitry. Where does the power for this golden ratio thing come from?
Now we get to the ultimate source, according to this research. The idea is that the trauma triggers an energetic link-up to the person's higher multidimensional self, their originates.
Okay.
And it's this higher self existing in another dimension that actually reaches out to what they term the prime source, parobia, the origin point of everything.
Right.
And then that high dimensional energy from the prime source is fed back via the higher self to activate the brain's full potential through that golden ratio structure.
So let me see if I've got this. The physical trauma forces a kind of energetic realignment. This snaps the person's awareness back to their higher dimensional aspect, which then connects to the ultimate source. And that energy flows back to light up this golden ratio spiral in the brain, granting access to universal knowledge.
That's a pretty good summary of a very complex concept presented in the source, yes. It implies these abilities aren't acquired so much as unlocked.
An innate potential that's usually dormant. That is a massive idea.
It certainly reframes human potential.
Okay, let's narrow the focus again. One specific skill that comes up surprisingly often in savants is calendar calculation. The source mentions it alongside the big ones like music, math, art. Why that particular skill? Seems kind of niche.
It does seem specific, doesn't it? And the esoteric explanation given is quite bold. The researchers propose that this skill is common because our current Earth calendar is, well, considered a fiction.
A fiction, as in just wrong.
Or at least fundamentally incompatible with the universe's actual underlying temporal systems. That's the claim.
Okay, that's a big claim. How do they justify saying our calendar is fictional?
They argue that our current system, based on Earth's cycles alone, lacks a true reference point for universal time or cosmic functioning.
Where is the savant?
The savant, through that higher dimensional connection we talked about, is operating using different, maybe wider categories, perhaps even pan-dimensional time concepts, and technology, as the source puts it.
So their calculations aren't just fast math, they're actually using a more correct, proper system. Wuxue.
That's the idea. Their calculations supposedly align with a system that has a truer connection to how the universe actually functions, time-wise. They're seen as tapping into a more fundamental reference point.
So the calendar savant isn't just calculating. They're potentially translating cosmic time into terms we can grasp. Remarkable, if true.
It is. But before we get too carried away accepting these incredible details, the Golver ratio spirals, the fictional calendars, we absolutely have to talk about the context the researchers themselves provide.
Yes, the reality check.
Exactly. The source material includes a very strong, very critical warning about the reliability of this kind of data, especially from single sessions.
This is crucial, right? Especially when we're dealing with concepts like prime source access. The methodology section warns that info gathered in these deep trance states is considered, what was the phrase, extremely contaminated.
Yes. Extremely contaminated. We need to understand why they say that so we can weigh these findings appropriately.
Okay, so why is it considered so contaminated? What are the main reasons?
They list 3 big ones. First, just the journey the information takes. It's passing through multiple dimensions, multiple densities, to get from wherever its origin is, say, the prime source, to the person relaying it.
And each step introduces noise, like static on a long-distance call.
Kind of, yeah. Each layer, each density can potentially corrupt or alter the signal. Distance and density distort the message.
Okay, factor 1.
Yeah.
Dimensional distortion. What's number 2?
Second, the signal isn't just traveling. It can apparently be actively intercepted or distorted by other entities, other beings or consciousnesses sharing those dimensional pathways.
Intercepted, you mean like interference?
Yes, interference, intentional or unintentional. Think of it as psychic static, or even deliberate manipulation by other intelligences operating on those non-physical levels.
Wow, okay, so dimensional static and potential psychic interference. That really complicates things. What's the third contamination factor?
The third one might be the trickiest. It's the filter of the person receiving the information, the subject in the trance state. Before they even speak, the information gets filtered through their own personal beliefs, their mental framework, their opinions, their cultural biases, everything that makes them who they are.
So it's like pouring pure water through a dirty filter. The output is inevitably colored by the filter itself.
That's a very good analogy. Universal knowledge gets strained through a very specific, very human lens.
Okay, so with all that contamination, dimensional distortion, psychic noise, personal filters, how on earth did they find any reliable data? It sounds like looking for a needle in a haystack made of needles. What's the method for finding the actual gold?
It requires an incredibly strict, almost severe protocol. You can't rely on just one session or even a few.
So what do they do?
They have to perform a huge number of sessions. We're talking hundreds, potentially thousands, and crucially, with different people asking the exact same questions over and over again.
Different people, same questions. Massive repetition. Why?
To find the overlap, they're looking for the tiny percentage, the minimal core information that consistently appears across almost all the sessions, regardless of the subject. That tiny common denominator is what they consider the reliable gold.
Okay, so the complex stuff we've discussed, the spinal impulse idea, the golden ratio access, the calendar critique, presumably, that represents the fraction that survived this intense cross-referencing process.
According to this specific methodology, yes. That's the data considered to have weight within this particular field of esoteric research. It's the signal that cut through the noise consistently.
That context is incredibly important.
Yeah.
And bringing it back to the big picture, the source material makes a prediction, doesn't it, about the frequency of savant syndrome?
It does. It predicts that the number of people acquiring these abilities, the number of savants, is actually set to increase.
An increase in sudden genius. What's the significance of that, according to these sources? Why would that happen?
It's seen as a kind of demonstration, a living example of humanity's inherent but usually latent potential.
How so?
These individuals, through their unlocked abilities, show us what we could be capable of if we weren't, as the source puts it, processed or limited by maybe past events or current societal constraints. They're like a glimpse of our higher blueprint.
A blueprint for greater capacity, for knowledge, for understanding, just waiting to be activated. The highest version of ourselves, kind of jolted into action by trauma.
That's the implication, a potential that resides within us all.
It really makes you think, if these incredible abilities are linked to connecting with a higher dimensional self, getting direct access to universal knowledge, it poses a question for all of us, doesn't it? What everyday trauma, maybe? Or what focused effort? Or even just a shift in conscious intention? What might that unlock? Even just a fraction of that dormant genius potential sleeping inside you?